Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Call podcast. This is part 2 of my interview with Mr. David Rodriguez about the American public school system. Mr. Rodriguez is the publisher of The Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto and serves as Mr. Gatto's agent. He is the founder of the Education Options Expo and the creator of homeschoolleader.com. You can follow his work at homeschoolleader.com and educationoptionsexpo.org. You can follow Mr. Gatto at johntaylorgatto.com. You can find Mr. Rodriguez on Facebook by typing in Fortune Focused past tense at yahoo.com and on Twitter at DJ Rodriguez 2015. For more information, please see the show notes page for this episode at wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools-2. All right, so I want to welcome everybody to part 2. Now we're going to talk about how the public school system hurts students and some potential solutions. For those who'd like to hear part 1, which covered the history and origins of the compulsory education system and the current American public school system, wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools is the place for that. But now, since we're moving on to look at how the current system affects students today, can you give a brief overview of some of the ways in which the current model hurts students and how and why the current model does hurt students?
Yeah, the number one way is mandatory attendance. And this is something that Gatto has spoken about. And I haven't heard very many people talk about it. I've heard people talk about the curriculum, of course, which hurts them, and a few other issues. But the key crutch in this whole system that people can understand is forcing kids to be where they don't want to be, around people they don't want to be around, mainly teachers who they don't know and students who they don't know. And just to take a step back, I have teachers who are in my family, and they're loving and kind people, and I love these people. So it's not teachers who are bad, it's the system, and we can get into that later about how teachers are victims as well. But when you force kids into a classroom, into a building, and you give them an assignment and say, this is an assignment that you should do, and we're going to evaluate on it. Okay, great. And then you perpetuate that habit for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, depending on how it is in the, kindergarten, first, second, third grade. But by the time it's, fourth grade up through 12th grade, you have a stranger giving you an assignment which you did not choose, and they're going to evaluate it. So you start to create this conditional self-esteem. So now you do the assignment and they give you an A, B, C, D, or A, B, C, D, F, whatever the grading system is there. And now, if you had a choice, do you want to have a high grade or a low grade? Well, naturally you want to have a high grade, right? You want to excel and do well. So, okay, this person told me I should know this. So we start to outsource our self-esteem, and we start getting used to strangers telling us what is important. And this is the self-alienation process that John Calvin spoke about in his seminal work, Institutes of the Christian Religion. But as we graduate, for example, let's say on high school graduation day, and somebody asks you, what are you going to do with your life? And you're like, I don't know. I've never had freedom to answer that. I'm always worried about the next paper, worried about the next assignment, and I've never had the time to actually develop an inner life, develop the inner man, develop the inner woman where I can actually know that. And that is developed in solitude and in practice, developing your self-direction. So those are two of the big ones: the compulsory attendance, being instructed by strangers. Some of the other ones are the lack of concentration in these schools. And this is demonstrated by the bell system. And if you notice that, I guess beginning in fifth grade, depending on what school you're at, you have bells that are just ringing and telling you where to go. Well, what do successful people do? Successful people have high levels of concentration. So when they're in their work, they are doing it with full concentration, full attention. And so now, at the height of it, you can see young people have very low attention spans. Even myself, I went through the public school system, and it's a matter of unlearning all those habits of distraction and, messing with this assignment over here or this paper, this homework. You have 4, 5, 6, 7 classes, and you never have a chance to really get deep into your own work. And that's the key thing, is that finding something that you enjoy doing, that you love doing, and then focusing on that, whether you're an artist or scientist or, it doesn't matter. But when you have bells ringing in your ear every 40 minutes, this develops the tendency to not complete things. Because if you're working on a project for 30 or 40 minutes, then the bell rings, well, I don't need to finish that particular assignment. I'll do it later. And I start another one in the next class, and I start another one in the next class. And these are all assignments you can choose. These are all assignments given to you by total strangers, and then you just keep going to the next class until you get this habit of not completing projects. Well, naturally, because you're not interested in them, but they're mandated by strangers. And then you're developing the habit of just changing topics, just changing what's going on. So the key part of learning is to have a high level of attention span. How long is your attention span? And being in the correct environment. Also, the schools, they don't allow for individual learning in general. And again, the teachers are just as much as victims too, because they have maybe 30 kids in a class, or if they have multiple classes, they can have up to 150 kids, 120 kids throughout the day, and they're giving their curriculum. And so there's no way they could possibly know each student's strengths and weaknesses. They're just trying to manage the classroom. They're just trying to keep the rowdy kids quiet and manage the energy in the room. And so you have these reasons that are damaging to the kids. And as you know, the real life, you choose your own direction. You choose your own mission in life. And if we're lucky, we're able to find this mission before we're 80 years old. And some people find it when they're 90 or older, which is it's better than not. But if we're given those questions and opportunity at a younger age and ask the big questions and get out into the world, now we can start breaking some of these just tremendous, what John Gatto calls the weapons of mass instruction.
So going back to the compulsory attendance aspect of this, something you didn't mention but that I think really is important is how this hinders and restricts the roles of parents and how it really hurts the family in that entire unit, along with hurting the development of communities. If kids are forced to be pulled away from their parents, pulled away from their families, pulled away from their friends and neighbors for that, now maybe they have friends at school or whatnot, but if they're forced to be pulled away from those units for 7 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 13 years out of their life, then it really restricts the development of those units and the role that parents and families and communities at large can play in the development of the children.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you bring that up, is that the family has been one of the problems for the state and their social control. And it is when the kids are out in some classroom, the family bonds are broken, and it's quite such a tragedy here. So now they're in a classroom with strangers, teachers they don't know, and because they spend so much time away from their home, it's not uncommon that these students, these children or young people, become strangers to their own family. And that's a very critical point, because the family is the unit of the community, and the main unit. So if you have some fracturing of the family, now the state can impose its will on the students away from the parents' supervision, and then they can tell the parents, oh yeah, your child's doing well in this area, struggling in this area, and oftentimes mom and dad are so busy with their lives that they just take it as face value. There's no opinion on their side, because they also went through the school system many times. So it's this taking advantage of the trust that the family has towards the school system, and this intention that the school's going to take care of the kids, just let's leave it up to the school. School knows best. When in reality, they don't understand that the state has a specific interest, mainly to create conformist type people and to shape them, like there's some wood or some metal. And this is why this conversation is so important, so parents can understand, hey, your kids aren't stupid. Your kids aren't, lacking ability. They're just disrespected. They're just not being asked the important question, like, what do you want to learn? What are you interested in? And given an opportunity to pursue that. And even now it's hard because mom and dad are often working. So now school acts like kind of a daycare system, and everybody's chasing the dollar. And fine, that's fine. If mom and dad got to work, that's fine. But how about grandma and grandpa, or aunts and uncles? There's solutions to the situation, and the strengthening of the family, I think, is why homeschool families have such strong families, and even families who just implement a respectful or voluntary type learning situation, they have that as well. But the family is vital, and it gets stronger and heals when parents take their kids out of the school systems and do something different and in a voluntary type manner.
Now, one term you keep throwing around is social control. So can you clarify, what do you mean by social control, and how does this social control promote conformity and restrict individualism, creativity, self-reliance, good learning, the things that we would want to take place with young people?
One of the key points about the founding of this country, I should say the key point, is the Declaration of Independence. And the reason is that was not a vote. Okay, the colonies were part of the Great Britain Empire at that point, and many people know the stamp tax and no representation without tax, or taxation without representation. So the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, they didn't vote. They just got together and said, we're just going to be free. We're just going to declare our independence. We're free from this empire, right, that's trying to overpower us, take our money, not give us representation in the parliament. We're free, okay? So that was a revolutionary move, that it was declared, okay? When you're revolutionary, you just declare things. And just a little side note, many of these revolutionaries were teenagers. 19 years old, 24 years old, right? Or 18, 17 years old, right? They're just young people. So you have these new country, they just create this revolution. Oh, so what happened is you had this empire that had its own little branch break off from itself and just said, nope, we're not part of you guys any longer. So what does that mean? Does that mean they want to continue to have revolutionaries? No, they don't want revolutionaries. They want just people who are just going to accept orders. So with the understanding that revolutions are not beneficial to the government, because right now we have the largest military budget in the world by far, and we have a military empire. The United States is a military empire, and it has military interests and targets. So they don't want fracturing. They don't want the breaking down of this government. And so that can occur. That's what the Civil War is about. It was not about slavery. It was about secession. And that's, Abraham Lincoln said he'll do whatever he can to maintain the Union. And he wasn't either way on slavery. But that's a different type conversation. So the social control aspect is vital because they don't want revolutionaries. So this is why you have conformists and you have standardized tests and standardized ways of thinking. They just want to keep everybody the same, and the way they do that is through the school system. And social control coming down to the business interests. There's a term called overproduction, and probably more recently called overcapacity, where if you have a business, and let's say, for example, it's a manufacturing VHS videos, then that's your business. And if you're not careful, then new technology comes out. It's called DVDs. And now, if you're not paying attention and up on the new technology, your business can be made obsolete. So when you have big money let's say big businesses, they can be made obsolete easily. And this is why, Facebook and Google and these huge companies, they buy their competitors. They just swallow up their competitors because they don't want anybody else to rise up and become a giant behemoth. And so what these social engineers want to do is to remove that ability to do so. So rather than try to outcompete these business companies, they said, let's just limit the mental capacity of these students. And so their idea is to actually make it so that there is no desire or there is no ability to create and be that self-directing, powerful person able to create businesses and technologies which could make them obsolete because of the competition aspect. They just want to stay as is. So rather than have a very competitive and economy full of independent people, they want to have one corporate entity. This is their dream, to have some super state where people are just working for this state, and the state or this entity rather, collects the profits and the people are doing the hard work, but the entity is just sucking off of them like a parasite, whereas the focus and the hope for many people is to be independent. They want to direct their own lives. So if you have a school system that removes imagination from kids and removes the ability for them to create their own lives, they now seek out permission from these outside entities. They now seek security from these quote stronger organizations, not knowing that when you seek security, that's not what you get. The great Douglas MacArthur said in life there is no security. There's only opportunity. And so when we try to pursue something that really isn't there, security is kind of a made-up idea that, is there security? This could be the last conversation we had. What security do we have, really? So the focus is social orders want to maintain their influence and their power, and they can't do it if there are revolutionaries out there wanting to lead the people, inspirational figures, man or woman, and especially if they're able to come up with innovative solutions. There's some really cool examples that kids are doing now with the internet and technology. So there's a lot of hope, and perhaps we'll get into that.
Yeah, we will. I want to return, though, to a couple of things that you've briefly mentioned. So standardized testing and compulsory curriculums. What are the issues coming out of those? I think a lot of people instinctively see faults in standardized testing, but maybe not with the compulsory curriculum. So what are some of the issues that develop out of standardized testing and compulsory curriculums? And also, what issues arise out of the way discipline is handled in the public schools, and how does that affect children as they're growing up and in their formative years?
Well, disciplines have to do with, detention, getting suspended, and, basically our early years shape us in the beginning. And so, we learn to stand in a line, be quiet, don't raise your hand. And so that teaches you the way that these social managers, what they want, So this is why we pledge allegiance to the flag, and regardless of what good it's doing in the world in terms of our country. And, really the ultimate fight is, between freedom and slavery. And so, yeah, you have those types of disciplinary issues, and we can elaborate on that if you have further questions about that. But standardized testing is a big one, just because there's no evidence that standardized testing has any influence on a successful life at all. All standardized testing is a way to get money for the schools, right? Because you have schools who are based on their standardized test scores. Well, what's a standardized test? Standardized test is a test that some bureaucrat either creates in the state capitol, which this is what it used to be, and then the Common Core curriculum, which is a nationalized curriculum where the test that you're getting there in Texas is the same we're getting in California, and it's created by the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. So this is the how they sell it there is, well, you got to have this base platform of standards. Well, who made these standards? And who are these people? Do they have some success in life, or like, do they have some vision of the future? Because we are living in the fastest changing time in history. And so to think that some politician specifically is going to know what type of curriculum is needed is just a joke. And this is why it's so exciting to see people like Elon Musk start his own school. And there's a variety of schools that are popping up. But standardized testing is basically like 110 years ago, Cubberley saying you're shaping kids like a nail. Well, you're a resource to be shaped and cut and fit into this social apparatus, as John Dewey said, that this is what they want to do. And it's occurring, actually. And this is why we're nervous to raise our hands anywhere. Let's say you're graduated high school or college and now you're in your workplace. There's still that habit of being hesitant to speak in public, to being hesitant to look like a fool for asking a question, because that's what we learned when we were in the 5th grade or we learned in the 8th grade. And there's a few ways we get programmed, and one of the ways we get programmed is through specific incidents. So if you have a highly emotional incident when you're a kid and you raise a hand, and you being very genuine and just a kind individual, and you raise a hand, you ask this question in class, it was a good question. And for whatever reason, the kids start laughing at you, or the teachers laugh at you. Now you have this very emotional and clear memory that you can reflect upon in 30 years and be like, oh, and maybe it's subconscious or not, but you feel like, oh, people judging me, and I don't want to be out of the social, my peer group. I want to be accepted by my peer group. And these are habits that we learn in the school system. And so that's one about the standardized test. The compulsory curriculum is just as damaging, because you have, again, total strangers giving you assignments saying this is what you need to know to be successful. And who are these people? And where is this curriculum coming from? And we didn't talk about it much yet, but there's so much money involved in school as well. And this is why John Gatto is known as the world's most courageous teacher, because he brings up all these financial interests, the book publishers, the building architects, the food suppliers, the writing materials, the writing suppliers, the paper, the unions, the pensions. I mean, there's so much money in this institution, and not many people want to talk about that. So to bring those issues up takes a lot of courage, and it's very vital that people understand that there's other interests besides your kids that are in the school system. And, teachers are just as much as victims as well, because they want to help kids. And they don't realize until it's too late, as a teacher, being credentialed and probably having tens, maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, that, wow, I became a teacher to help kids, but now I'm delivering a curriculum that's not even from my state. Now it's coming from the national capital, and I'm evaluated on how well I can deliver this curriculum, how well they do on the test. So, okay, kids, this is going to be on the test. So you got to know this and you got to know this. Okay, Mrs. Smith, this is going to be on the test, but how is this going to affect my life? And that's the question that they don't even know. Teachers are taking orders, principals are taking orders, superintendents are taking orders. I mean, nobody knows where this curriculum is coming from in the school. But you and I know it's coming from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They're a big component of it. You have David Coleman, creator of Common Core curriculum. And yeah, these guys, they want social control. And we got to opt out and start creating some inspirational models that actually exist, and helping these kids come up and actually become powerful revolutionary leaders.
Well, and the Gateses, of course, also want Microsoft computers and Microsoft software, Microsoft programs being used in all the schools. That they have, as you mentioned, all the moneyed interests involved in the American public school system. They have all kinds of moneyed interests involved there too. But I want to return to what you were saying about teachers and even principals and superintendents, because I think and I've spent a lot of time around people in public education. The vast majority of teachers, overwhelming majority, probably north of 95%, are good people, kind-hearted people, well-meaning people. And the majority of them are in this because they feel like this is a way to help children. They like working with kids and they want to help kids. So it really is unfortunate that that's not how it turns out. But I think describing them as victims is a great way to describe them, because they really are in this out of the goodness of their heart in many cases, and it just doesn't play out as helping children because of all of these structural issues and all of these reasons behind the scenes that they're not necessarily aware of.
Correct. I'm glad you restarted the point there, because teachers, if you're a teacher and you're listening to this, understand you can do a lot of good in your classroom. You might not be able to change the whole system because of all the financial interests and political cronyism going on there. But what Gatto said, and he even self-admitted, he said, I am a saboteur. And he said, whatever you can do, throw sand on the gears of this machine, and understand that its victims are the students, its victims are the teachers, its victims are the parents, because everybody is just trusting in this thing. And then once you get there, you're like, or you've been doing it for 5 years, you ask yourself, man, is this is not what I imagined. This is totally different. And you get caught up and you can't do anything about it. So some recommendation from Gatto, if you're able to do it, is he would, in the beginning of the year with his 8th grade class, he would sit down with them in circles of about 5 or 6. And you can see this demonstration on YouTube for free called Classrooms of the Heart. This is a free documentary that did capture some of his magic. But he would help these kids do independent projects. And when I say do independent projects, he would ask them, what do you want to do? And whatever you want to do, I will help you teach yourself. I will help you learn to teach yourself to do that, and I will not censor. So this is a really great documentary about that. But what happened is that they would select a project, and for that year, he would help them, give them ideas, kind of, guide them, but they're the ones doing the work. And one example, well, there's a variety of examples, but one is that many students want to be comic book artists, right? So they're sitting in the classroom, bored as all can be, and they're drawing comics. And so one kid wants to become a comic professional. Okay, so he said, go down to the library for a week. I'll mark that you're present, right? He's the homeroom teacher. So he just said, okay, I'll cover for you. Go down there and spend 40 hours learning about the comic business. How do comics make their money? How do they get published? What's the marketing behind it? What type of background do you need? What type of skills do you need? And get a holistic view of the business versus a very surface level view, which you're definitely not going to get in the 8th grade. But that's the suggestion for teachers out there, is to, become a saboteur. Become somebody who marks that your kid is there when they're not. Let them get out of the classroom. Let them get apprenticeships. And one of the great takeaways I got from John also is he would build a parent community resource. And he said he did his best to meet every parent of his kids, which is over 100 kids per year, and he would try to build a database or this resource where he would go meet the parents, find out what kind of profession they were in and any particular interest they would have. That way, when he has a student from a different class who has interest in becoming, let's say, electrician or something, and you have, Johnny's parents from the 5th period class who is electrician and, is looking for help or volunteers, now he can connect the two. So this is another way to utilize the resources, which doesn't cost a thing. You might have to put some time into it, but to look at your parents as resources, because they're out there in the real world. And that's what we want to do, is we want to help get these kids out of the classroom of this synthetic world and get them into the real professional world, preferably in something that they're interested in. And that way they can get the experience and actually get a perspective on that particular field and if they want to do that or not.
All right, now before we wrap up, let's move on to some potential solutions. Now, some that are right in front of people's faces a lot of the time that they hear a lot about and that they're familiar with to some degree are charter schools, which of course are still connected to the public education system, but charter schools, private schools, and homeschooling. What role can each of those play in helping to solve this issue, and why does the education coming out of those types of schooling produce better results in most cases than the education coming out of the public school system?
I believe the future of education is going to come from homeschooling. And that's what we're doing at homeschoolleader.com is to redefine the term because I should say under the homeschooling umbrella, there's a term called unschooling. And this is akin to what John Gatto talks about as open source learning. And this is where you can learn from whatever that teaches you, right? So basically, the world is your classroom, and anything you can learn from is your teacher. And a really funny example is Isaac Newton, when he, this great scientist, physicist, he's sitting under a tree, and the apple falls from the tree, and he says, man, why did that happen? What caused that apple to fall right here? So in that case, the tree was the teacher of one of the greatest physicists on planet Earth. And that's a kind of, road example there. But we are living in a time where you don't need to be in a classroom. And that's the essence of open source learning, of unschooling, and even parts of homeschooling is that you have now freedom to go out and learn what you want to learn. And if you ask an 8-year-old what they want to learn, they'll tell you. And it's in my experience, after they've been through the public school system for, let's say, 8 years in their 8th, 9th, 10th grade, and they have not been given freedom to choose what they want to learn, they now actually don't like to learn. They've now associated learning with memorization and boring books and irrelevant assignments. And so they choose to say, whatever, I just want to watch TV, play video games, entertain myself because I've been disrespected as a human being. No one's respected my mind, so I'm just going to entertain myself, and that's the way they go. So I believe the future is open source learning under the homeschooling umbrella. Also under homeschooling, some parents, they have a religious focus, which is fine. So they want to share and promote their religion to their kids at home. And so they have a little bit more of a structured setup, and they have a curriculum where the religion is there, and you have math, and you break it up into subjects, and that's fine. But my recommendation is don't do school at home, right? Don't force kids at home, but being at home with mom and dad doing a curriculum is 100 times better than being in a classroom with strangers having the state curriculum. And then you have the charter schools. And as you mentioned, the charter schools are state funded, and they have the ties to that. And that's, again, you follow the money and you'll follow out how the organization is run. And so there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as free money. So when the state gives this charter school money, they're going to say, great, what are you going to give us in return? We're going to give you evaluations. We're going to tell you what the students are doing. And sometimes you got to take tests to fulfill the requests. But some of the charters are fine too. You just have to understand what is education. That's what I would say is that for parents and teachers out there, you want to have the conversation with the students, with your kids. What is education? What are we doing this for? And even bring it up. And this is what Gatto would do with his students is he would bring up the topic of compulsory schooling with his kids. And you can see that in the documentary. He brings it up a couple times, but they would have a conversation like, why are we in the classroom? Why are we forcibly here? And they made that a topic of research and to be open about it, right? Not to hide what's going on here, but let's be open and honest about it. And that's what many teachers won't be able to do, or maybe they feel like they won't be able to do because maybe their job would be on the line. But private schools, so there's another great one. It's called democratic schooling. And you can learn about democratic schooling at educationrevolution.org. They have a great resource. And if you hear this program before August 2016, there's an event in Portland, Oregon, which you might want to attend and go learn about. But they've been promoting this, and there's a great school which inspired democratic schools worldwide about 90 years ago. It's called Summer Hill. It's in the UK, and if you go on YouTube, you can watch a movie about it. It's called Summer Hill, 2008, and it's a school setting, and this particular school is a boarding school, but there's no force. What's that mean? That means they have optional classes. So you arrive and they say, okay, here's some of the classes you are free to take if you want. And if you don't, well, you have a whole, bunch of acreage outside. You got swing sets and bicycles, and you can go explore and build boats or whatever you want to do. And they don't mandate you take classes, because they understand, as the founder, A.S. Neal, understood that you can't force kids to learn, and you can't expect them to be happy, fulfilled adults when they're doing things because they should do things. Successful and self-fulfilled adults are doing things because they want to do it. It excites them. They like it. They love it. And so those are some of the models. There's also a school. Oh, I really love these guys. AgileLearningCenters.com or .org. But they're based in New York, and they're spreading schools worldwide. There's a lot of different options that, I guess you can learn more on my website. You can reach out to myself. But the whole idea with my Education Options Expo is to help parents understand some of these options, because it is confusing out there. And as I mentioned, I do think open source learning is the future. And I think we are in the beginning of, not the beginning, we're in the education revolution, especially with technology. So look for some huge changes, I think, in the next 5, 10, maybe 15 years. I think the entire system is going to look different. People are fed up with it. They're looking for answers. And I think it's great that we can continue having this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a very exciting time. And if nothing else, most people see that students are coming out of the public education system and they're struggling. They have a hard time reading. They have a hard time with critical thinking, with listening, which is basic skills. People recognize that the public education system is not developing those skills the way it's supposed to. And people are also recognizing that the internet and new technologies are providing additional opportunities for people to educate themselves and to become educated through other means. So it's a very exciting time that we're living in. And I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the near future. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you where everyone can follow your work, and then also what you recommend someone read or watch if they're interested in learning more about the sorts of things we've been discussing today.
Yes, so you can learn about some of these options. I have an event in March 2017 coming up. If you mention this interview, I'll give you a discount to the event. I have speakers come in, I have exhibitors come in, and the whole purpose is to empower parents by introducing them to respectful models of learning. And this could be homeschooling. It could be Agile Learning Centers were there last time. Montessori schooling were there. This is Education Options Expo.org. Take a look at that. You can look at my YouTube channel as well. I have interviews up there. I've interviewed Sugata Mitra, some other Ken Danforth, some really great thinkers in the educational world and people that are doing work to actually find solutions to this. I'll be launching a online course for parents called homeschoolleader.com. Hopefully by the beginning of the school year, so that parents can learn how to do that. I recommend reading JohnTaylorGatto.com. I recommend watching that movie Summerhill on YouTube. EducationRevolution.org is a good site. AgileLearningCenters.org. One little tip too is for parents who are concerned about, let's say, homeschool and the prospects of a successful life, they want to look up Francis S. Collins. He was the founder of the Human Genome Project, and he was strictly homeschooled and became highly successful. You have the Venus and Serena Williams, tennis professionals, and they were homeschooled. There's a lot of successful homeschoolers. There's a great clip about that on my YouTube channel. And there's a resource to get college degrees in shorter periods of time from long distance. And you're not going to hear about this from the traditional university system because it's not as profitable, but it's called Bear's Guide to Earning Degrees by Distance Learning. And it gives you the instructions and how-tos to get a college degree rather than 4 or 5 years, maybe 18, 24 months. And sometimes, at a third of the cost. And this is a huge benefit just because with the revolution occurring, the high school diploma, the college degrees, many of these are going to become obsolete because there's so much money there that there's just universities popping up and schools popping up where you can't even evaluate it. And many times students will come out of Ivy League schools or, these typical, perfect quote schools, but they're not able to actually work. They don't have the ethic, they don't have the mindset, the attitude, the persistence, and homeschoolers do. And so homeschoolers are highly welcome at these universities because they get their studies done. They're serious about their work. And that's all these universities. If you do have to go to university, then you'd have that advantage for yourself. And also, I should mention too, I will be launching a school in the fall called ValorAcademyWorldwide.com. So you can go there and stay connected. And the purpose is to get these kids out in the real world doing what they love to do. And with YouTube, podcasting, and blogging, you now effectively can have your own TV channel, your own radio station, and your own newspaper without any barriers to entry. No permission needed. You can get social media up and out there. You can connect with people, and it is a phenomenal time to be alive. Connect with the people with similar interests in your community. Maybe go to meetup.com, Facebook, find local community groups. There is a revolution happening, and thankfully you have programs like this. The Wake Up Podcast is doing good work. There's a lot of great people here listening, and you guys are the hope. If you're listening to this, you are the hope, and have courage. Keep connected, with Adam and Daniel and like-minded people. Connect with myself on Facebook. And what I can say is that there is some rocky times coming, but I think we're going to get through it, and it's going to be quite interesting, the journey. So stay tuned, and connect with me at homeschoolleader.com, educationoptionsexpo.org, and johntaylorgatto.com. And let's stay in touch. And I appreciate the chat, Adam. Look forward to chatting some more.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very exciting time, and I want to encourage everybody to go to wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools for part 1 of this interview, wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools-2 for part 2. On both pages, we'll link to johntaylorgatto.com, we'll link to educationoptionsexpo.org, homeschoolleader.com, the @DJ Rodriguez2015 Twitter account. All of those links will be available. So wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools for part 1, wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-schools-2 for part 2. And while you're on our website, I would like to encourage everybody to sign up for our email list so they can stay updated on what's happening with our show. And I would also like to encourage everybody to follow us on Twitter. @WUC Podcast is the handle for that, @WUC Podcast. And on that note, David, thank you for being so generous with your time. There's so much to discuss with this topic. We could have kept going and going and going for much longer, but it's such a critical and important topic, and I'm glad we were able to cover it in the depth and detail that we have been today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, and hope to connect with you again.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wake Up Call podcast.
If you would like to listen to more episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, or subscribe on Stitcher, and check out our website at wakeupcallpodcast.com.
There you will find show notes pages and comment sections dedicated to the show. You can also email us at contact@wakeupcallpodcast.com if you're interested in being interviewed for the show or have any other suggestions.
Thank you.